Okay, everybody, we're back with Kennedy Thompson, the founder of One World Tribe. So, Kennedy, know you guys created how many CDs or how many albums did you guys create all together?
Three.
Okay,
Three albums. The first one was Unity and Diversity. The second one was World Today. And the more recent one was Armed and Dangerous. We're working on a new one now.
okay,
So it'll probably be out sometime in 2025. But we're probably about to lay down the final tracks within the next 3 to 4 months. We've already laid down about 10 or 11.
right,
We're about to put another maybe 8 or 9 down.
okay,
It's not going to be, I'm recording enough tracks that I could have that we would have 2 albums worth of material.
okay, cool, yeah. So, how over the years, how are like original ideas brought to the band? Is it in rehearsal? Y'all just come up with stuff?
It happens in every kind of way. Sometimes one of the members will have a idea, uh, like Preach might come in the basement. He might have the idea for No Justice, No Peace. He might have recorded it on a sequence on a keyboard and say, this is what I hear. And we'll just learn it, from what we're hearing on the sequence, and then might tweak some things in the process of rehearsing and learning the song.
Right.
Or Frank might do the same thing. He might have a sequence, or he might come to me and he might have an instrumental. He might bring like Rio. When he came with Rio, he had the instrumental to the 3 sections. There were no lyrics.
Okay.
He said, "Can you do something with that?" I said, "Yeah." So I said, I got with Enrique, and me and Enrique came up and with some vocals, Spanish and English, and we put that together. And then Maddie came in towards the end of the process and tweaked some of the lyrics, the English lyrics. And so that's how that track came together. And then also sometimes we might be in the basement and we just be jamming, and an idea comes up like a groove. And then somebody will take that groove and go put something to it, like some words, or organize it into some kind of structure. So in every kind of different way.
There's really just it just come.
It can be in any kind of way, yeah.
Yeah. So I know you guys were able to establish a presence outside of Erie too in some bigger markets. Can you talk about that a little bit, or how that happened?
Yeah. Well, sometime around, I want to say 98, late 98, early 99, we had played the biggest events in the city, headlined the biggest events, as we talked about earlier, Celebrate Erie, which was We Love Erie Days back then, Summer Arts Festival. We were at that point as big as we could be without being a national act. Like, people know who we are in the city for the most part. And so at that point, we had talked about trying to take it out into other markets. But the thing about when you start going into other markets, especially if the markets are 2 hours or more from home base, you start to get into a different animal. Because at that point, you're going to be traveling places since 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours away from home base. You're going to be spending money on gasoline, food, maybe hotel rooms, depending on how far out you're going, what time the show's over. So you're getting into some expenses that are different from when you're a local act. And you also, when you start traveling to those places, if you're an original band, you're probably going to have a product, which we had completed the CD by that time. We had our product. Now you got to understand that when this process is over, the recording process, CD's done, we're about $18,000 in debt. So we got to pay those bills.
Right, you got to pay your bills off. Right.
We got to pay $18,000. We got to pay them off. That's going to take some time. And at the same time, you got to go out to these new markets. They don't know who you are. It's like starting over in Erie. It's harder in the other market because in Erie, you knew some people to begin with that you could reach out to get them to bring their friends and their friends. you're going to some of these other places for the first time, you're faced with the challenge of how do we start a buzz in a place where no one knows who we are. Okay. So, we sat around in a game planning, me and Maddie, how do we do this? Now, at this point, Maddie had already created the Great Jam.
Okay.
And he was bringing in national acts and regional acts from all over Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and we were making contact with them and friendships were forming. And so we thought to ourselves, the best way, if you go book a show at Nietzsche's in Buffalo and, Joe Rubino decides to give you a date, well, then the challenge becomes, if you go there and play, your headline and 8 people show up, he's not going to give you a second date.
Right.
So you got to avoid that.
Right.
So what's the best way to avoid that? So we thought to ourselves, the best way that we can do to try to establish this market is, let's find some groups that we know, that we have some friendships through Great Jam, and if they're big in that market, let's see if we can open for them. Let's see if we can open for them, or if we can talk to some promoters in those markets, make contact with some promoters, because we had some contact with the promoters through Great Jam, some different acts, and see if we can get spots opening for national acts. Now, we're not going to make a lot of money, but the point is,
exposure.
If you're hitting in front of a massive amount of people, you're jumping ahead. Then you go into some place repeatedly, 8 people here, 10 people there. It's a hit or miss thing. Might take you 3 years to even,
And if they're willing to stick with you that long,
if they'll stick with you that long. So, like for instance, Buffalo. The way we broke Buffalo, which Buffalo became as huge a market for us as home base. Like, there are people in Buffalo right now that think that One World Tribe is a Buffalo band. And if you were to go down the streets in Buffalo and start talking about One World Tribe, there will be people that will tell you that that's a Buffalo band.
They're from Buffalo.
Because we won awards in Buffalo, at the Buffalo Music Awards, and there was a time period in the band where there were more people in the band living in Buffalo than there were Erie people. There was a period where there were 6 individuals in Buffalo and 5 in Erie, and 1 in Pittsburgh. So
they would come up for shows.
Yeah, and Preach was living. Preach had moved up there. That was even more like people seeing Preach and seeing those Buffalo heads, they assume it's a Buffalo group.
Right.
But the way we broke into Buffalo is we had booked a show at Broadway Joe's. And Broadway Joe, he called me about 3 weeks before the show, and he goes, Kenny, I gotta cancel you guys out because Yoke is coming through. Now, Yoke was the biggest unsigned act that would come through Broadway Joe's in any kind of a jam band reggae thing, that kind of what we were at. And so I got to give the date to those guys because I got to pay the rent. He told me that. He was a very straightforward guy. Broadway Joe.
It's a moneymaker for him.
It's a moneymaker for him. I said, okay. I said, I understand, Joe. I said, but do you mind if we call those guys, because we know Yoke, and see if we can open for them? And so we called them, and we said, hey, Maddie's talking to them. We like to open for you guys. You guys got an upcoming date. And Yoke was like, yeah, we got that one, and then we got one coming up in January too, like the end of January. And Maddie was like, well, can we open for you on both of them? And Yoke was like, yeah, sure, because they were playing Great Jam. They didn't want to ruin any connection. When Maddie called him, he had some sway because Great Jam was becoming a big thing. And they were like, they were open to that possibility. And so, yeah, we'll give you guys $250 for both shows. Now, fortunately, before that show, the first show, which I think was in December, we had played a show in November around Thanksgiving where we weren't headlining, but we were opening for a group called 100 Iced Animals, which Brian Christie was the manager of that group at the time. He would eventually become our booking agent in Buffalo area, Western New York. And we had gone to play during the summer his festival called Blind Baby's Holiday. But we got up there and we were messing certain members. Certain members didn't make it. And he said, can you represent? And I said, no, we can't represent right. And he was like, okay, I understand. He goes, but I still want to work with your group. And he invited us to do that show. So we went and did that show with 100 Iced Animals in Buffalo. About 150 people in the crowd. There was a buzz when we left. People were excited, but we need to follow it up.
Mm-hmm.
So we had the Broadway Joey show, got canceled. We hooked up with Yoke. Now we have 2 shows with Yoke to follow that show up with. First show at Broadway Joe's with Yoke. Bam, 230, 40 people in the crowd. It was the end of the semester, so it would have been a larger crowd, but a lot of people had gone home. But we slammed them. So now there's really a buzz. We still got another show coming up in January when school starts back, which is going to be packed.
Right.
And before that show, Brian Christie was able to get us hooked up on AM Buffalo, which was a talk show, like an Oprah Winfrey show or some show like that in Buffalo, which hundreds of thousands of people in the Buffalo area watch every morning. And we came on there and we played, and we did songs from the CD, which was out. Right. And they were advertising the CD and were saying this group will be playing at Broadway Joe's coming up with Yoke and blah, blah, blah. That just created even more hype, unbelievable hype. By the time we got to that second show with Yoke, because of that TV appearance, there were people coming to the club as they were coming through the door asking, when is Tribe playing? And the tour manager from Yoke kind of got upset and was like, you guys ever heard of Yoke? And me and Brian Christie just kind of looked at each other. Okay, it's happening. The buzz has definitely gone.
Is it, right.
And from that point, we were on the trajectory to become the biggest unsigned act in Buffalo. And from there, we branched out into Rochester, Syracuse, Utica, and then started going into Pittsburgh, Cleveland.
So, as we said, Tribe is not a 3-piece band for people who don't understand. People who've never seen Tribe, it's definitely not a 3-piece. Yeah. It could be 30 people on stage sometimes, right? Or 20 30 people, right? 20 people?
2001, we counted 20 people. Even the dude up there with a parrot on his shoulder doing juggling. So we just looked at him like, what is this, a circus? There's a circus on there, a World Beach Circus is on stage.
So what are some highs and lows of having that many people in the group?
The lows of it is you got to try to feed people. The stress, especially when you're trying to become this regional band. You're doing these shows, man, like I say, those first 2 shows with 250, you're not going to make any money. Mm-hmm. At that point, Maddie was like, I told Maddie, we're not even going to tell the band what we're playing. I got faith in the band. I got faith that after those 2 shows, the next show will be 400 people. We'll be headlining, and from there, we'll be gone. Right. That market is ours. Mm-hmm. I said, but you got to go to Rochester. You got to go to Syracuse. You got to kind of repeat that thing. You're going to open for somebody, you're not going to make any money. So then you got to come back home and you got to pay some guy who's, working his ass off. You got to pay him $20 if he's got $20 because you're building.
Right, you're trying to It's starting all over again.
It's hard, and you got a lot of mouths to feed, But you got to have those mouths in that type of group because that music has a lot of elements in it. Mm-hmm. The percussion is in there, some level of horns is in it, double guitars, double keyboards. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Right.
So you can't say we're going to strip it down to this much because it won't have the same impact.
To 5 people, it wouldn't. Yeah. It just wouldn't.
So the highs of it is when people see it, they go, okay, so they got a lot of people or something, but either these guys is going to suck or something's about to hit us,
So it creates expectations just by looking at it.
Yeah, you're seeing all these different people. It's very diverse. It's diverse. You're seeing all these different races, ethnicities. Lynn Johnson has put the question out there. And, I say, well, Lynn, you might be onto something. Lynn Johnson says he thinks it's the most diverse group, racially and ethnically, from a music standpoint, that he's seen. He put it up against Santana, against War. He's like, everything is in there.
Sly and the Family Stone.
African American, Caucasian American, African. Not only Africans, different sets of African, West African, East African, Haitian, Cuban, Puerto Rican, an Asian who's Jamaican, nationality-wise. All those things is in that group. So when people see that diversity, they're going, whoa, they look like One World Tribe. Mm-hmm. Everything is up there. So that creates an anticipation. What are we about to hear?
Right. It's inclusive too.
It's
It makes the world feel inclusive.
Yes.
You see somebody up there that looks like you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. It's inclusive. And people say, well, man, you know, they can get together and be together and create harmony like this. What's wrong with this planet? What's wrong with the rest of us? What are we doing wrong?
Right. Right.
It's like an example. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as you look back, as we get ready to wrap up the interview, any regrets or things you look back and say, man, we could have did this, we could have did that, anything like that, or are you pretty much satisfied with everything that's?
Well, the only regret, like we got in this pen pad thing, man, in like 2004, and it opened up a whole new world to the band because now we were in this organization that would help us get to these different markets and help pay for it on major events. I wish I had done that in the early part of the group because I think we would have been even much further ahead.
Right, right.
That was the only regret that we waited
too long
to apply to the pen pad. I didn't even know about it in the early. I wish I would have known of it.
Right, right.
Would have been able to apply to get us into that. You know, it would have saved a lot of financially. It would have solved a lot of problems earlier because when you got all those debts, when you got $18,000 debt on the CD. You become a regional band. That's the other thing. That, when we get in a regional band, I told you we're getting into some different things. You got to get a vehicle.
Right.
You can't have 6 people.
Now you got to be traveling together.
You got to have one vehicle. You got to pay for it. You're going to have to pay. Nope. You're going to have bills. When you become a regional band, you literally are going to become closer to a national act without the resources of a national act. So becoming a regional group really creates a lot of issues that you got to be able to weave through,
right?
Right. And it becomes complicated.
So, you want to tell everybody what the band's up to now? What are some things? Anything coming up that they might
this
be
is the
looking
30th anniversary of the group this year. I'm not sure if we're going to do a show because right now one of the key members is battling a health issue, and but we are practicing. He is practicing. We are going to get this recording done here in the next couple months. And hopefully have that CD out, like I say, sometime in 2025. That album is probably going to be called Keepers of the Flame.
Okay.
Because of what it represents. I think the members of One World Tribe have been Keepers of the Flame. We're going to have some guests on there that are nationally known people that have also been Keepers of the Flame, and people that, transcended. You know what I'm saying? They influence the world in a positive light.
Right.
If we talk about Dr. King, he's a keeper of the flame. Malcolm X, keeper of the flame. Robert Kennedy, that's a keeper of the flame. Anybody that pushed humanity forward in a positive light. John Coltrane, keeper of the flame. So that's the concept behind this album.
Okay.
And but if I got contacted about doing a show, we'll see if that pans out on one of the major events for the 30th anniversary. It probably would have happened if Moondog was still.
Definitely would have happened.
Would have happened if Moondog was still at the helm of 8 Great Tuesdays, but now that he's not, I don't know if it will happen. But we'll see if this other organization comes through, and if that happens, you'll see that hit. And we'll see what happens with that.
So before we wrap up, Kennedy, do you have any advice for some younger musicians out there who are like coming up in Erie? They didn't get a chance to see Tribe, but they heard about you guys. What are some advice you could give people? They don't just want to be a cover band. They want to get out there and become a regional, national. What would you say to the people like that?
I would say, first of all, practice. A lot of groups today, it doesn't seem like they like to rehearse. Rehearse all the time. Fine-tune your craft. Fine-tune your songwriting. Get your thing together so that when you go out into those places, you hit, people remember you. Like I said, you can't break into the market. Make connections with those people in those markets that are on the top. Open for them. If your product is good, the crowd there is they coming to see them. But when the smoke is cleared, they might be like, who was that? Right. You want to, that's a standard you got to meet, because in those markets, those bands are the standard. The people will come in there. have no expectation on you.
Right.
In fact, they probably expect that you ain't gonna be about nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You can prove them wrong.
Right.
It's in your hands, you know. So,
ladies and gentlemen, this was Kennedy Thompson, the founder of One World Tribe. Thanks, Kennedy, for your time. I appreciate the interview.